Welcome to the extended panel of the Georgia Vote. If you're watching us this Sunday, welcome back. And if you haven't watched us this Sunday, hey, welcome. And we hope you join us next Sunday at 11. Joining us, of course, Zach Merchant, my co-host here for the Georgia Vote, Devin Barrington-Ward with the Black Futurists Group, Republican strategist Stephen Lawson, and Shannon McCaffrey with the AJC. So this week, we're talking shutdown. We are talking the big win for Democrats across the country. We're also talking gubernatorial and Senate races in 2026. I want to start off with the big news from this week, that election. Let's bring it back here to Georgia, Devin, and start with you. These PSC candidates that were running, Democrats won. You're talking about a service commission that on a typical election year, this might be a down ballot race, but I mean, this was top and center. Not only are we talking about it here, but nationally. Why does it matter so much?
Well, one, it matters because it is an indication that ratepayers in Georgia have had enough. The fact that this Public Service Commission under Republican leadership has not pushed back on these rate increases that are really, local news outlets are picking up the fact that people are getting $8, $9, $1,000 electricity bills. Working class people. And so folks are recognizing that this is compounded with broader issues and saw that this was a priority. Now, this also was beneficial that this was taking place during municipal elections, would tend to bring out more Democratic voters. And so Republicans knew that they had that to contend with this election being on the ballot. But we can't just ignore that this was just a fluke. I think this is a bellwether call of things to come. And folks will have to adopt a message that really is resonating with voters across the state, which is around getting deadlocked on affordability, because it's getting really scary out there for folks.
Kind of a momentum builder, many Democrats would say, going into the midterms. Stephen, I want your perspective, a Republican's perspective on that in a moment. But Shannon, let's go to you first, because turnout and the turnout totals caught some people by surprise on Tuesday. What did you make of all that? How many people came out to vote?
Yeah, I mean, it was striking for an off-year election. I mean, these are typically elections that really just the diehards get out and vote. The turnout, I believe it was about 900,000 voters on election day,
and 1.5 million total.
Yeah, and that's a high election day. That's a high election day turnout. I know that Republicans were hoping that the election day turnout would reach about 1 million because they felt like their voters tend to come out on election day, and they were sort of hoping that that would get them over the hump of what they knew was going to be a difficult election, because it's municipalities that had elections. Those tend to be more Democratic. I mean, the deck was stacked against the Republicans a bit going in, but the turnout was huge. I think we did an analysis where 22 counties that voted for Trump in the last election flipped and became Democratic this time. It's like Paulding, Columbia, some fairly reliably Republican counties. So yeah, turnout was huge.
So is the issue, Stephen, a lack of motivation from Republicans because they didn't have anybody on the ballot because it was a municipal race, or do people just stay home because they just don't care too much about their power bills?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I think, first of all, any comparison between this election and 2024 is like apples and bowling balls. It's not a complete comparison. I understand that there are some Democrats that are wanting to do this, but it's just not. It's not a reality. As Devin rightly said, in 2021, the municipal elections, it was about a D+15 turnout. So we expect this was always going to be a steep, steep hill for these candidates to climb, as you guys have covered. The only reason they were on the ballot was because of legal challenges. They really should have never been on the ballot. But that being said, I do think the margins were indicative of some flashing yellow lights for Republicans.
And for people who, not to interject, but for people who maybe don't know those margins, it was about a 20-point break between the two Democrats and the two Republicans, right?
Correct. And I think that's why I am not in the camp of the sky is falling, but I am in the camp of there are flashing yellow lights about the results. And I think Republicans rightly need to understand that the issue of affordability is top of mind for voters. The good news is that here in Georgia, I believe Republicans have a record to run on when talking about tax cuts and economic development, property tax relief. All of those issues are things that Republicans have delivered on, and I do think these election results are going to make the case for them to be front and center this next legislative session and heading into 2026.
And of course, we're still very early here. Devin, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, I think there's a record to run on, and then there's the reality of what's happening politically in the moment, which is that, unemployment numbers are going up, inflation is going up, and consumer confidence is going down. And so that is a record to run on. But when there's this prolonged government shutdown, along with all of these other measures that I just mentioned, I don't know if you can overcome all of that with just the previous record that Republicans have to run on here in Georgia, because one will ask themselves, well, that record has led to a $1,300 power bill for one of my neighbors, right?
And people are feeling it.
I do want to push back. I think people came out for these public service commissioner races because they saw a direct through line between what's happening in their pocketbooks, in their households, in their bank accounts, and what's happening politically, and people were able to connect those dots. And so I don't think that it's just a flashing light. I do think that it is a larger warning for the Republican Party. And I'm not in the business of advising Republicans, but I will say I hope that this General Assembly, we do see some more legislation that gets to issues around affordability and cost in Georgia.
Affordability is definitely going to be the buzzword of this roundtable today. Shannon, let's bring you in. I was struck by the fact that in 2024 we heard so much from President Trump and his campaign, then former President candidate Trump, talking about affordability, at least when he was focused on, I think, probably the messaging that his strategists wanted him to focus on. 2025, Democrats in this PSC race are focused on affordability. There are some twin arguments being made by two very different parties right now.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of folks give, and by the way, I just want to say I agree with you that I don't think you can take a message from this election and translate it into a midterm. I think there are some issues that overlap, but I think they are very different races. I just wanted to make that clear. But I also think that the issue of affordability has been one that Trump talked about a lot when he was running. You haven't heard much since he was elected. We've heard a lot about Middle East peace. We've heard a lot about Ukraine. We've heard a lot about China. He's been, I think, much more focused on international affairs in many ways than he has on the economy. I'm going to guess that some smart political strategists in the White House look at the results from this past election and maybe do a pivot.
And that's the question a lot of people say. You agree with that, Steve? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a question here in 2026 in Georgia. Is, again, my belief is that Republicans have an economic record to run on, and I think that will be front and center. But how does that balance with macroeconomic issues potentially putting downward pressure on Republicans?
And keep in mind, too, like this election, rather small for Georgia, kind of played up very big for Democrats because, I mean, this is their first win in quite some time. I mean, Democrats, I feel like, so it is being played up. To Stephen's point, will that motivation last until May, and will that last until November? That's the big question here, at least for them. And should Republicans be concerned about that?
Well, again, I think it is a matter of what Democrats who are in elected positions choose to do with the momentum. Do Democrats at the municipal level push policies that get to affordability, that help candidates that are running up the ballot have more credibility on these issues, or do they just rest on their laurels? So that will be a question for the Democratic Party and Democratic officials. We recently had, here in Atlanta, we had a Democratic socialist that was elected to Atlanta City Council, Kelsey Bond. And so I think that this is showing that people are starting to shift a little bit more on these issues around affordability, and they want to see more progressive, more what some may call radical proposals around getting to the issue of affordability, because people feel like their situation personally is radical when they're seeing that their grocery bills have gone up 20, 30, 40% in less than a year. To the point that was made earlier, there hasn't really been much said out of this White House about affordability. There's been a lot about international relations and war in other places, or trying to stop war in other places. There's also been a lot of political retribution of his, former political allies turned enemies, people that he feels has had an axe to grind against him. We've heard a lot about a $230 million.
And Devin, I'm so sorry. We're getting the wrap up here from our producers, but this is the thing. There's so much to discuss in Georgia politics, in national politics. And I would point out, you talk about a Democratic socialist being elected to Atlanta City Council. There were also centrist Democrats in New Jersey and Virginia elected. Right. This is a conversation Democrats may continue to have. Which direction is the future, at least in the short term, of the party?
But we can continue. Party of a Big Tent,
and we can keep discussing this at another time, because unfortunately we are out of time today. Guys, thank you as always so much, and thank you as always for watching We'll see you next time.